You're nothing but a washed-up security guard who couldn't even make it through college." My younger brother Daniel's sword sliced through the crowded funeral reception like a blade. The room fell silent, every eye turning toward us as stood there. In his expensive suit, pointing an accusatory finger at me while our grandmother's casket sat just 20 feet away. I'm Jessica Morgan, 40 years old, and I'd driven 8 hours to attend my grandmother's funeral. The woman who raised me after my parents died when I was 12, my auburn hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and I wore the only black dress I owned, one. That had seen better days. The small scar above my left eyebrow, a souvenir from Afghanistan, caught the light as I looked at my brother with quiet dignity. "Jessica can't even afford proper funeral attire," Daniel continued, his voice growing louder with each word. "Look at her discount store dress, scuffed shoes. Grandmother always worried about you. Always wondered where she went wrong with you." The assembled relatives nodded along, their faces a mixture of uppity and second-hand embarrassment. My aunt, Patricia, whispered something to her husband about poor Jessica and how she'd never amounted to anything. These were people I'd grown up with, people who'd watched me struggle after our parents' death, who'd seen me work 3 jobs to put myself through. Community collective board disappearing from their lives 15 years ago. What do you even do for work? Daniel pressed on, clearly enjoying his audience. Some kind of mouth security crossing guard. I heard from Aunt Pat that you haven't even been able to afford a phone for the past few years. I remained standing quietly, my hands clasped in front of me, watching me brother destroy what little was left of our family bond in front of everyone who had once mattered to us. The familiar weight of responsibility settled on Miss Holders. The same feeling I carry yet since I was 12 years old when I promised our dying mother I'd look after Daniel. You know what the real tragedy is? Daniel's voice cracked with mock emotion. Grandmother left her entire estate to both of us equally. Half goes to me, someone who actually matters something of himself, who has a family, a career, respect in the community. And the other half goes to, he gestured at me dismissively, well, to whatever this is. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, shifted uncomfortably in his corner chair. He was a kind man in his 70s who'd handled our family's legal affairs for decades. I could see him checking his watch, clearly wanting this painful display to end. "I'll beckon testing the will, of course," Danielle announced. "No one in their right mind would leave a fortune to someone who can even afford decent clothes." I'm sure when the court sees the evidence of Jessica's circumstances, they'll agree that grandmother wasn't thinking clearly in her final months. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Micah and Sarah, who had always resented that grandmother had favored. Nia's Ackles spoke up. "It does seem unfair, Daniel. You've worked so hard, built such a successful business. Jessica's just, well, she's been gone so long, none of us even know what happened to her." "Exactly," Daniel said, warming to his theme. "For all we know, she could be homeless, living in her car. Look at her. When's the last time anyone here heard from Jessica? When's the last time she contributed anything to this family?" I thought about the past 15 years. About the weight of the rucksack I carried through the mountains to South Afghanistan. About the nights I'd lay awake in forward operating bases, writing letters to Daniel that I'd never sent. Trying to explain why I'd had to leave. Why I couldn't tell him where I was going or what I was doing. She probably doesn't even have a steady address. My Aunt Patricia chimed in. How can someone inherit property when they didn't even have property of their own? The room buzzed with agreement. I could see the satisfaction in Daniel's eyes as I watched his carefully orchestrated Perkark unfold. This wasn't spontaneous. He'd planned this, turning me own family against me before I'd even arrived. "I think we all know what the right thing to do is here," Danielle contended. "I'll make sure grandmother's legacy goes to someone who can actually honor it, who can maintain the family home, who has the means and the respect to carry on the family name." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat softly. "Actually, if I may interrupt, not now, Henderson." Daniel waved him off. "We're having a family discussion, but sir, I really think I said not now." Daniel's face flushed red. "Can't you see we're dealing with a family crisis here?" The room fell silent again. I could feel the weight of everyone's judgment, the irpity, their certainty that I was exactly what Daniel had painted me to be, a failure, a disappointment, a cautionary tale. That's when I heard the sound that changed everything. The sharp rhythmic lick of military dress shoes on the funeral home's marble floor. Every eye in the room turned toward the entrance as 3 figures in pristine dress uniforms entered the reception area. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Hayes led the group, her silver oak leaves gleaming on her shoulders. Behind her walked Major David Fletcher and Captain Amanda Reynolds, both moving with the precise bearing that marked them as career military officers. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Colonel Hayes said, coming to attention and rendering a crisp salute, "we apologize for arriving late. The flight from Washington was delayed." I returned the salute with practiced precision, my spin as straightening as 15 years of misclamoury. Took over at ease. "Colonel Dot, thank you for coming." The silence in the room was deafening. I could hear my brother's sharp intake of breath. Could see the color draining from Aunt Patricia's face. "Ma'am," Major Fletcher stepped forward, his voice carrying clearly through the stunned quiet. "General, Morrison asked me to extend his condolences and to inform you that the memorial service has been arranged for tomorrow at Arlington National Cemetery. If you'd like to attend. General Morrison." Daniel's voice came out as barely a whisper. Captain Reynolds spoke up, her tone respectful but puzzled as she looked around their room. "Colonel Morgan, we weren't expecting to find you at a civilian gathering. We were told this was a family funeral." "It is," I said quietly. "This is my grandmother's funeral. These are my relatives." The 3 officers exchanged glances, and I could see the moment they realized what was happening. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes' jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Your relatives?" Major Fletcher's voice carried a note of disbelief as his gaze swept over. "My silent family members. These some relatives who were just, yes," I said simply. "Major, would you mind giving my family some context about my current position?" Major Fletcher straightened to attention. "Colonel Jessica Morgan currently serves as the Deputy Commander of Joint Special Operations Command. She holds the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, and the Defense Superior Service Medal. Colonel Morgan has served 3 combat tours in Afghanistan and 2 in Iraq, and she's currently responsible for coordinating special operations across 4 geographic commands." The room remained frozen in shocked silence. Additionally, Captain Reynolds added, "Colonel Morgan was recently selected for promotion to Brigadier General. Her confirmation hearing is scheduled for next month." I looked around the room at the faces of my family. People who'd known me since childhood, who'd watched me grow up, who'd just spent the last 20-minute test convincing themselves I was a failure. "Daniel," I said quietly, "you asked what I do for work." My brother's knot the penned and closed soundlessly. "I serve my country," I continued. "I've spent the last 15 years in positions classified above your security clearance, which is why I couldn't tell you where I was or what I was doing. I've missed birthdays, holidays, and family gatherings because I was either deployed in combat zones or working in facilities that don't appear on any public maps." Lieutenant Colonel Hayes stepped forward. "If I may, Colonel Morgan, your service record is extraordinary. You're one of only 3 women currently serving at your level in Special Operations Command." I nodded my thanks, then turned back to my family. "The reason I don't have a permanent phone number is because I move between secure facilities. The reason I don't town a house is because I've lived on military bases for the past 15 years. The reason my dress is simple is because Eve learned that expensive things don't matter when you're carrying a wounded soldier to a helicopter or sitting with a dying. Marina wants to tell his mother he loves her." My Aunt Patricia had gone completely pale. Jessica wouldn't. "We had no idea." "No," I said, my voice steady. "You had no idea because I never asked. You assumed, you judged, and you condemned without everyone's considering that there might be more to the story." Daniel finally found his voice. But I called your old apartment years ago. They said you moved and left no forwarding address because I was deployed to Afghanistan," I replied, "where I spent 14 months straining local forces and coordinating operations that I still can't discuss in detail. The weight of 15 years off sacrifice of missed family moments, off choosing duty over personal comfort settled over the room like a heavy blanket." "You want to contest grandmother's will?" I asked Daniel. "Y'all think I don't deserve her legacy because I can't afford expensive clothes?" I reached into my simple black purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is a copy of my financial disclosure, form required for my security clearance level. Would you like to know what a colonel with 15 years of service, combat pay, and special duty assignments managed to accumulate?" Daniel's face had gone from red to a shine white. The house grandmother left us. I could buy 10 of them without taking out a loan, but money was never the point, was it? This was about respect, about family, about the benefit of the doubt. I looked around the room at my assembled relatives. I've spent the last 15 years serving with people who would take a bullet for me, and I floored him without hesitation. People who trust me with their lives, who respect me judgment, who know my worth not by the price of my clothes or the size of me bank account, but by my actions and me character. The silence stretched on until Mr. Henderson finally spoke up. If I may, he said gently, I believe there's one more document that might be relevant to this discussion. He opened his briefcase and withdrew a sealed envelope. Your grandmother asked me to read this only if there was any question about her state of mind when she wrote her will. He opened the envelope and unfolded a letter written in my grandmother's familiar handwriting. Tummy family, he read aloud. I know that some of you may question my decision to leave half of my estate to Jessica. You may think she disappeared, that she abandoned us, that she chose something else over family. Daniel sank into a chair. His earlier confidence completely of a pod. But I want you to know that Jessica never abandoned us. She called me every single week for 15 years, whenever and however she could. From peonies and airports during layovers. From secure facilities where she could only talk for a few minutes. From field hospitals where she was recovering from injuries she never told me about because she didn't want me to worry. Tears began to flow down several faces in the room. She sent me photos when she could. Not of herself, but of the soldiers she served with, the people she protected, the children and villages she helped secure. She told me about the letter she wrote to the families of fallen soldiers, about the nightmares that kept her awake, about the weight of command and the price of duty. Mr. Henderson's voice grew softer as he continued reading. Jessica sacrificed her personal life, her comfort, her safety, and her chance at a normal family life to serve something greater than herself. She's the finest person I have ever known, and I am proud that she carries our family name into battle and brings it home with honor. The room was completely silent now, except for the sound of quiet crying. If anyone questions this decision, if anyone believes Jessica Addison deserved what I'm leaving her, then they never knew her at all. And if they never knew her, it's because they never tried. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, Major Fletcher, and Captain Reynolds stood at respectful attention throughout reading, their faces reflecting that profound respect they held for both my service and my grandmother's words. When after Henderson finished reading, I looked at my brother. Daniel's face was buried in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Daniel, I say quietly, I never stopped loving you. I never stopped being your sister. I just became something else too. Hal looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. Jessica, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know, I said, but sorry doesn't undo the words. Sorry doesn't take back the assumptions. Sorry doesn't erase the fact that when I needed my family to trust me, to believe in me, to give me the benefit of the doubt, you chose to tear me down instead. I turned to address the room. I'll be returning to Toddy next week. My lawyers will handle the estate matters. And for what it's worth, I forgive you all, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it doesn't mean pretending this never happened. Lieutenant. Colonel Hayes stepped forward. Colonel Morgan, Westhold returned to base. You have a briefing with the Joint Chiefs tomorrow morning. I nodded and turned back to my family one last time. Grandmother always told me that true strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about how much you can take and keep moving forward. I've carried that lesson throughout 15 years of war zones, through nights when I thought I might not see morning. Through moments when I had to make decisions that would keep other people's children safe while I missed watching my own family grow up. Daniel stood up slowly. Jessica, is there any way we can rebuild trust? I finished for him. I don't know, Daniel. Trust is earned through consistency over time. It's built through actions, not words. And it's destroyed in moments like this. I looked around the room one final time at faces I'd known since childhood, at people who'd raised me and loved me and ultimately failed to know me at all. But I'll tell you what I told me soldiers in Afghanistan. Every day is a chance to choose who you want to be. You can choose to be people who assumeth worst and tear each other down. Or you can choose to be people who lift each other up and believe the best until proven otherwise. I walked toward the door with my fellow officers, then paused and turned back. By the way, Daniel, grandmother's house. I'm donating it to a foundation that provides transitional housing for homeless veterans. There are too many people who actually serve their country sleeping on the streets. Tonight for me to worry about real estate values. As we looked out into the cool evening air, Major Fletcher fell into step beside me. Ma'am, if I may say so, you handled that with remarkable grace. Grace has nothing to do with it, Major, I replied. That was 15 years of learning that you can't control what people think of you. You can only control what you think of yourself. Captain Reynolds looked thoughtful. Colonel, what will you do about your family? Relationships going forward? I considered the question as we approached death military vehicle. The same thing I've always done, Captain. I'll serve with honor, led with integrity, and trust that people who matter will see me for who I am rather than who they assume me to be. As we drove away from the funeral home, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. 40 years old. Scarred but not broken, wearing a simple black dress, but carrying 15 years of honor and service. My grandmother had been right about strength. It wasn't about how hard you could hit. It was about how much you could take and still choose compassion. Over cruelty, understanding your judgment, service over self. Behind us, my family was learning a lesson that many people never master. That assumptions reveal more about the person making them than the person they're mad about. And that real strength often wears humble clothes and speaks with quiet dignity. Truth was, I didn't need their validation to know my worth. I'd earned that knowledge in the mountains of Afghanistan and the desert of Iraq, in the faces of soldiers I'd led and the families I protected and the flag I'd served under for 15 years. But hoped foolishly perhaps that people who'd known and me longest would have known me best. Instead, they taught me that sometimes the most profound betrayal comes not from enemies who never cared about you, but from family who stopped trying to understand you. The vehicle pulled away into the night, carrying me back to a world where my worth was measured not by the price of my clothes or the size of my bank account, but by the weight of my word and the strength of my commitment to something larger than myself. And in that world, I was exactly who I was meant to be.